Thank you to everyone today joining us from across the country and the world. I'm Alexander McCobin, the CEO here at Conscious Capitalism, Inc., and just so appreciate you taking the time to learn and grow in community with us today. I'm excited to be joined today by Brandon Hatton to celebrate his new book, Conscious Wealth, Transforming Money into Abundance, Purpose, and Unity. Now, as many of you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the human nature of capitalism in business. It's a movement of business leaders around the world working to improve both the practice and the perception of capitalism to elevate humanity. And Conscious Capitalism, Inc. is a nonprofit organization dedicated to catalyzing that movement. Every week, we offer virtual gatherings as a way for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and business practices of those in our network. And today's gathering is going to run for about 60 minutes. Brandon and I are going to be in conversation for the first half to 45 minutes, but then we're going to transition to audience Q&A. And so if at any point you have a question or a reflection that you want to share, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I'll make sure we get to as many as we can. And if you run into any technical questions or issues, email us at info@consciouscapitalism.org, and we'll resolve them as quickly as possible. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Brandon Hatton. Brandon specializes in family dynamics around multi-generational wealth and is well-versed in advising clients on how to use their financial assets to help make a positive societal impact, whether through investments or philanthropy. This can include facilitating an exit from a company, transferring wealth, or preparedness for the next generation. He endeavors to help his clients live an abundant life with intention, and for him, an intentional way of life includes knowing personal goals as well as acknowledging what it will take to reach them, then doing the work. I'll also share that I've just absolutely loved the opportunity to get to know Brandon myself over the years through the Atlanta chapter of Conscious Capitalism, then the Senior Leader Network, and getting to see you together in Denver a couple of months ago, Brandon. So I am just so grateful for you writing this book and taking the time to share it with the Conscious Capitalism community. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. I will always treasure our conversations in Denver. It was a lot of fun, and it's good to see you online as well.
Indeed. So I want to get into the book, but first off, I gave the normal elevator pitch on who you are, but
Sure.
I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more of your story and what led you to doing what you do today and taking a conscious approach to financial advising for everyone who's listening in.
Yeah, thanks. I think what's unique about, I don't know if it's unique, but here's what happened. Here's part of my story is I've lived on every side of money. And so I kind of grew up, and whether it was true or not, I lived in a world, I felt a world of scarcity. I felt like there wasn't enough money, right? And we always had food, we always had shelter, but I had a lot of fear around money, and it was a real fear. So when I had an opportunity, wondering how deep I should get into this story, it's I'll tell you, I grew up always wanting to make a lot of money, and something happened around when I was around 20 years old. It was sad, big event, and it was at the same time I was in college, of course. Is that my brother passed, and what happened was it did crush me. And what I changed my major at that point. I was in a business major, accounting major, and I always wanted to just get into business and make a ton of money. And at that point, I just kind of opted out of the money business, and I decided I was going to be a teacher. I was going to be this humble public servant who really didn't kind of like lived below money, didn't really need money, and felt a lot of self pride around not needing money. And that held in pretty true for a long time. Until about my mid-30s, and I decided that really wasn't true anymore, that I kind of wanted the pleasures of having money, and I wanted to take some chances and have a career. And I kind of like the pendulum swung to the whole other side, and I went into like the most toxic, potentially greedy industry there is, which is the financial services, or just finance. And I just kind of went all in on that. And I went too far, like, so to speak. I got kind of caught up in it until I was lost in it, and had to reset. And so these two extremes of like not having enough and having too much was something I've actually lived. The book, when you see the title, Conscious Wealth, the two words are in different fonts because they are contrast a lot. And they're triggering words. Like consciousness triggers people. They hear it and they say, well, I'm not that. Like, I'm not some guy who lives on a mountain with all this wisdom. And then when you say wealth, that even triggers more people. Like, I don't know, I'm definitely not wealthy. Somebody else is wealthy. The Kardashians are wealthy. Or, you know, Andrew Carnegie in the Gospel of Wealth is wealthy. And in truth, like when we look at all of these spectrums, and I've been gifted by working in financial services to work with people who have financial assets, the task is to navigate this spectrum between something of otherworldly and the most worldly thing we have is money. And so I wrote it because I saw a lot of people get stuck on that spectrum. I saw myself get stuck on it, either having too much or not enough. And I felt like I am in a position with all the beautiful conversations I've had to learn from other people and put it in writing.
Thank you for being willing to share that and going so deep right away with us, Brandon. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so you started to get into this a little bit, but I would love for you to expand on why you decided to write this book in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm being brutally honest, I originally started to write the book way too long ago and was lucky to accelerate the writing process with Corey Blake and the Conscious Capitalism press team. But I originally started way too long ago because I thought, well, I'm going to use this to bring in more clients. And then I got the actual book in my hand and I started reading it. It was a galley proof. And I realized like, oh, this is like about a message. This book is me in writing. This is a message. It's a message about letting people let go of fear around money so that they can have so much more. They can transform their money into so much more than just perhaps simply a lifestyle. And that's where it all transitioned. It's like, and now, so when I'm building up next year, like a lot of workshops that we're doing and speaking, and all of it is really geared towards this message because I see so much pain around money and pain around trying to answer the question I hear all the time, like how much is enough? And I wanted to help model how you could answer that question.
So let's dive into that a little bit more. If you're willing to share a couple of examples of the painful situations that you have worked with clients on that can bring to life the challenges that this brings up.
Well, probably the one thing that I see, and this is a law of nature, like I don't just make this up, or this isn't some theory that I have, that anytime something is created, something is destroyed. We know this to be true. And so wealth creation is nothing different. When wealth is created, something is destroyed. And we can see that in the terms of family relationships, marital relationships. We can see that in the environment. We can see that with your relationship or one's relationship with themselves. And oftentimes it's because, or I would imagine it's because, and what I see it is because people have gone too far when trying to answer how much is enough, or they get stuck, as I mentioned before. They get stuck in thinking that they don't have enough, or that the purpose of money is solely to build a lifestyle, and they lose track of what matters. And I was gifted, and many people that I've spoken to have been gifted with an opportunity to reset. In my case, it was a health scare. When you have a health scare, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Like, not at all. You know, it's like, it becomes very clear. It kind of just level sets everything and gives you an opportunity to question what matters and to question what you've created. And what's beautiful about that, in my case, is although I did have a health scare and I did create wealth, whatever that means for me, like it doesn't have to, whatever that means. There was destruction. There was destruction in my personal life. There was destruction in my relationship with myself. But I had one thing that most other people don't have that can help heal that destruction. And that thing is of course money. Like it's financial assets. And it's ironic, but we can use what helped cause the destruction to heal ourselves.
Okay, that's a cliffhanger right there. You have to say more.
Sorry, I just didn't want to talk forever, so I didn't know. I wanted to keep this as a dialogue.
This is a dialogue, but I want to pull out your
okay.
wisdom and insights and what's in the book. So please,
thank you,
keep
Alexander, for calling me out. So all right. So how can we do that? The first thing we can do is examine our beliefs around money, and we can hire on support and help to help examine those beliefs around money. One belief that I always had coming up in the business was make hay when the sun shines. And I would guess that anybody who's successful has heard that expression before, or some form of that expression. When there's an opportunity, seize it. But as I was in this period of questioning what was important to me and looking at the destruction that was created in my life around wealth creation, I started to question that belief. I started to wonder, like, do I really have to make hay when the sun shines anymore? Like, maybe sometimes I can go out and play when the sun shines. Like maybe I don't always have to seize these opportunities. And I could look back at my past and see influences in my life of people I've worked with who've done that. And I accepted to take that belief and call it my own. But with this period of questioning and examining my beliefs around money, I was able to examine that belief and a lot of the other beliefs I've had. And I've been able to fund or pay for, whether it be therapists or coaches or training, whatever it is, to question some of these like hardwired beliefs and reframe them. And by doing so, the goal is to transform your money into something beyond just lifestyle, but into abundance or a sense of fearlessness and understanding that you have enough. You be able to say, I have enough. I don't need to make hay when the sun shines every single time. I don't have to worry about the next deal coming in. It will come in. And if it doesn't, I'll find some way I'm fine, I'm safe. And that's really that first level of conscious wealth that I talk about in the book is being able to create that transformation of money for lifestyle and saying, wait, I have enough on the lifestyle. How can I have enough to create this sense of abundance?
So it does sound like that is very different from the way that people typically approach wealth accumulation and what advisors typically do with clients. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what is the norm in the industry and how different this really is.
The norm in the industry is, if you give me money, this is the value proposition that we have. If you give me money, I'll give you more of it. Right? And I lived within that norm for a very long time. The problem with that is it's a lie. I cannot legally promise, and definitely and realistically promise, that every time somebody gives me money, I will give them more. That's just not how it works. There are down markets, which is hard to believe in 2021 because it's been a while, but there are down markets and people lose money. And so that's the normal value proposition. And what and a lot of this book is, and there are a lot of good practitioners in my industry. There are a tremendous amount of highly ethical advisors that I respect. Where I would like to see wealth management move towards and be more of the mainstream is, if you give me money, I will help you transform it and understand what kind of lifestyle that you want. And once we get beyond that, how do we transform that into abundance? How do we transform that into purpose, impact, and unity? How can we unite people with our money and use all of that to transform it so much more than just the next thing?
Thank you, Brandon. So I feel like we're getting into this already, but I am curious if you can say a little bit more about why you are the right person to be delivering this message, and why that people should read this book by you in particular.
Well, I would like to state, I guess I would like to say that I'm just happy to be part of the discussion, and it makes me feel good to be part of the discussion.
I appreciate your humility. Now let's get to why you right now.
Sorry. Thank you, Alexander. Look, I work in the belly of the beast. I work with money, and as I mentioned before, I look to navigate and create range along the spectrum of money and consciousness, and how can I navigate this space? And there are a lot of people from the other side who work on the consciousness space that speak of money. There are less on money that speak of consciousness, but to be able to combine the two is the message that's important for me and important to deliver. And look, we've tried everything to create social change. We've tried everything. And one of the things that's missing are the people with financial assets truly believing that they are enough, that they have enough, and that they are just custodians of their money. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who are, there are many people who I admire who do that. But until that is like, it's, I guess, what they call a tipping point, right? Until there are more people, that's what holds it back, in finding ways to create, showing that it's in the best interest of the wealthiest for everyone else to be successful, to me is a lot more viable option than what we're seeing oftentimes in mainstream, which is shaming wealth, or I guess guilt, which is related to that, or just legislating it. All of that is going to happen independently, but what I find is a more valuable and viable approach is demonstrating that it truly is more fulfilling to look out for others. And more fulfilling within your own life, not just, yeah, I think that's clear. Yeah.
So let's talk about how this applies to the work that you do. How do you incorporate some of these principles into the advising that you do?
Sure. Yeah, if it's all right, Alexander, I'm gonna jump back to something before on that, because we're talking a lot about my work, and I want to shift it just a tiny bit, because I just started to talk about transforming money into abundance, but also like purpose. And I think there's a lot of value there that also is related to your question, because the spectrum of transitioning money. So if you can get to a point where you say, I have enough, and you can get to a point where you feel you are, that you don't have to fear money anymore, you're not going to stop making money. In fact, what's oftentimes going to happen is you're going to make more, because people are attracted to you. And so it becomes a real question, if you can get beyond this point of fear of money, and whatever that number is, you're going to have extra that you can transform into something, and transforming that into purpose. And when I talk about purpose, it sometimes gets a little bit too heady for people, or I compare purpose to like this existential car keys, where people are always looking for it and they get nervous about it. And it really, purpose for me is just bringing out the truest expression of yourself. And that's part of the healing that I spoke of before, this idea that when I spend money intentionally, I can do it in ways that heal myself, that heals who I am, and heals some of the destruction. As I mentioned, a lot of times with wealth creation, you just forget who you are. You get to this point and you're like, wow, I've climbed the top of this mountain. I have all the success, but I don't feel like the person I was when I started that climb. And how do I get back to who that was, right? And intentionally spending money, or intentionally not spending money, or designing a lifestyle that takes off some of the pressure to earn. The example I give of this is I cut spending into two categories: enhancements and enrichments. And enhancements just makes my life easier and better and kind of sweeter, but enrichments really helps me become a better person. And I say better person, the truest expression of myself. And the example I give is I love coffee. And some people criticize the coffee shops I go to because I go to the most pretentious ones I can find. Like, I want to go to the one where the guy's got a vest and a thermometer in his pocket, and his life is creating that coffee and making the most gorgeous cup of coffee. And so for him, making that cup of coffee is a sense of enrichment. It's bringing him to who he is. It's an expression of who he is. And for me, it's just an enhancement. Like, I just really enjoy a nice cup of coffee. It doesn't make me a better branded, unless the offer was like Folgers on the other hand. If it was between Folgers and his coffee, it makes me a better person. But in general, it doesn't. And so how can I look at all of my expenses? And that's something we're doing in these workshops right now, in evaluating, is the money I'm spending on things bringing out my truest expression of myself? Am I converting my money into who I really am? And those are the types of discussions we have with clients. And we're not here to judge, because, as I mentioned, the same thing, a cup of coffee, can be enrichment to one person and enhancement to another. It's just understanding, as I'm spending my money, is it helping me be who I want to be?
All right, so we did not plan to do this, everyone.
Okay.
And I'm giving everyone a heads up, and I'm giving you a heads up, Brandon. That I'm just going
No
to throw
worries.
this on you on the fly. But I'd love to actually see that in practice a little bit. Would you be
Yeah.
willing to do that for a few minutes to kind of illustrate what this looks like?
Yeah. What do you mean? Or how would you like that? Yeah.
So take me as someone that you're working with and helping me figure out how to spend my money to bring out the truest expression of myself. How
Sure.
would we go about doing that?
Well, so I think the first part that we would want to do is understand. So what we do is we create a Family Matters document. And a Family Matters document is our all-encompassing statement for a family. And if it's one person, then the family of one. And the first thing we do is we start looking at your top 5 values as an individual. And we list those. So our financial plans always begin with values. And then the second is vision for yourself. So I would ask you, Alexander, what's the vision for yourself? What do you see for yourself in a year, in 5 years? I would ask you for the vision for the world. What kind of world do you want to live in? And then we would look at what most traditional financial plans in which we do includes, right? That was like, okay, so what are we spending on? What's our cash flow look like? And then if it were a multi-generational family, that's where real opportunity begins. I mentioned that there was a lot of destruction or disengagement around wealth creation. Oftentimes that happens in the second or third generation. As the first generation is going out there and creating something special, oftentimes the second and third generation may feel left out. They may feel neglected. There may be, however they feel is valid, but is that there is a disengagement of that generation at times. And when that occurs, calling them together and saying to all of them, individually and then collectively, what are your values? What is your vision? What's your vision for the world? And with all of these multiple levels, where can we find something in the middle, or where can we find some form of compromise where everyone can meet through discussion and through family conversations? And so in a real concrete example of spending money to bring out somebody's purpose is, you may decide, you may have someone in second or third generation of your family who has a dream of opening some type of business. They may or may not have the business sense to do it, but using your money to build up that individual so that they can fulfill their purpose would be an example of that. Does that help? It wasn't exactly interactive, but does that help more?
I think that's really helpful, and you're bringing out so many other things for us to talk about. And one thing comment I want to make is that what you're saying actually reminds me a lot of what David Gardner at the Motley Fool likes to describe a lot in his podcasts and when he speaks to Conscious Capitalism around your investments, that your investments should reflect your best vision of the future and what you want to bring about. And you're talking about not only investments, but just how people work with their wealth and capital across the board, right?
Absolutely. All types of capital, family capital, human capital. Absolutely. Philanthropic investments. We call them investments for social change.
So when you say family and human capital, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So human capital is just simply what I can, all my where I've gotten to in life and how what I've learned along the way to help contribute to the world and provide value for the world. But family capital is just as important. A lot of times we have families come to us and they're ready to make a contribution to the world. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to see a family already gelled. I say, can you create your values? And they're like, yeah, we already wrote it on last year's vacation. And you're like, wow, that's awesome. And other times and more often, truthfully, is that there is some form of disconnection within the family, and that there's some form of healing that needs to be done within the family, and in using financial assets and a financial plan like these family matters as a form of healing and as a form of communication, so that when and if they decide to create businesses like conscious businesses, or when they invest in philanthropies, they're able to do so in a way from a good place or from a very strong place. And that the cornerstone of family capital is communication, because that's everything. Yeah.
So you're talking about families a lot, and you talked about intergenerational wealth, and I want to actually dig into that a little bit because you have a concept in the book that I hadn't heard of before called money memories,
Yeah.
and how money memories affect the way that we see money in the present. So can you share a little bit about what that is with everyone?
Yeah, sure. So money memories. So the first time we meet with the client, we will always ask them, what's your first memory about money? And it's amazing what we hear. Alexander, what's your first memory about money? We're going to try this now live. Do you remember your first memory of money?
Oh my gosh, I'm sure I have other memories of this, but what comes to my mind is selling popcorn for the Boy Scouts when I was a kid.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the next question we would ask, and this one takes a little longer, so don't feel compelled, and sometimes it can take weeks and months to unravel. But how does that impact you today, right? Like, and it sounds like selling popcorn for the Boy Scouts was rather a positive experience.
It was. And actually, I now remember. So there must have had other memories, or I had other experiences with money, but my grandmother taught me arithmetic by teaching me blackjack, and I could win pennies, nickels, and dimes by learning to add and subtract. And so that was a very positive experience with money and learning a skill by recognizing the value of the skill in relation to money.
That is why I love this question, because I've never heard that answer before. Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, and it's a memory of your grandmother too, which is really beautiful. Yeah, yeah. And so these memories that we have, and sometimes they're buried away, they can impact us for the rest of our lives. They can definitely impact us for the rest of our lives. There's another story I heard recently of a friend, which was absolutely amazing and fascinating, is her grandmother used to let her play with the quarters in a cigar box, I think it was. And when her grandmother passed, they gave her the box of quarters and said, these are yours, but don't spend them because they're grandma's. And that could impact people in many different ways. Like, it could definitely impact people in different ways. And one possible impact could be, well, maybe I should save all the time. Maybe it's not, it's not okay to spend money on myself. That would be one viable belief. Whatever the belief is, they're valid. We've created these beliefs around money because of experience we've had. But what I challenge all the time, and I challenge myself and in the book, is, are these beliefs still valid? is it valid that you still have to save all the time? Is it valid that you can't spend something that's special or use something that's special? And does that still serve me today? And through that questioning, we can create more peace with ourselves and with money. And really, that's the point. We want this to flow, right? And that's, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a fascinating concept, and I'm going to be reflecting on that. And
I'd love to
I,
hear. Let me know.
I
Yeah.
we'll need to have some more conversations about that, as well as
Yeah.
how I can use my capital to live out the best representation of myself, as we talked about.
Yeah.
And want to just ask a couple more questions before starting to get to Q&A from the audience, because questions are starting to come in. And if anyone has any questions for Brandon, please start typing them into the Q&A box. But well, but you talk in the book about how wealth creation is also sometimes accompanied by some form of destruction, and that money can be a way of healing that destruction as well. I'd love for you to explain that a little bit.
Sure. So I began by talking about how the first stage of conscious wealth is when you can say, I have enough. And then you get to a point where you say, I am enough. Like, it's enough for me to spend money on myself. As you get along that spectrum closer towards this idea of consciousness, these really strong affirmative statements start to fade away. And you start to question things. Instead of saying, I have enough, you start saying, do I have anything? Is this really my money? Can I take this money with me? Well, I've heard a million times, no. So therefore, is it really mine, or am I just a custodian of it? And I am enough. Well, am I really separate from other people? Right. And how can I, how can I be successful when other people are not? And so as we look at as you look at your financial assets, you can convert them at the highest levels towards impact, or in other words, the purpose of other people you've never seen before. And we can do this through conscious business. And it's really important to note that I do not believe you can run a conscious business without a truly conscious business, without believing you have enough, without believing that you are enough. And that type of internal transformation is absolutely necessary. But if you have made that internal transformation and you are working on it, right? It's an ongoing process. You can apply that to a business, and you can create value for all of your stakeholders and your stakeholders. And you can and create opportunity for them to heal, and opportunities for them to become the truest expression of themselves. But there aren't business models for everything. For example, there's not a business model for an orphanage. We don't really want a business model for an orphanage. That's just straight up philanthropy, and using your money for, like, a good friend of mine has an orphanage in Nepal. Using that money for somebody's children, not just your own, but on the other side of the earth that you may or may not have ever met before, is a way to create unity and to affirm this belief that I am not that separate from everybody else, right? And so, and that's definitely a type of healing through these non-business models. There's philanthropy that's needed as well.
I so appreciate that, Brandon. And then, just one more question from me.
Yeah.
Wealth and consciousness, you talk about being polarities, and it's our task to navigate those polarities. And
Mhm.
there's even a whole field of research and coaching on polarity management that I think applies to this. But how do you recommend people think about navigating those extremes at a high level?
Read the book's too simple. That's too high level, huh? Yeah.
No, we could say you got to read the book for it. Absolutely.
I think, I think so navigating these spaces, I would have to say that most of it comes down to reflection, and reflection requires time and space. It really does. And sometimes that's taking your foot off the gas pedal on the business, and allowing other people to move forward within your business so that you can invest in other things, including yourself. Yeah.
I love that, Brandon. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to start taking questions from the audience, and if anyone has any more questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. But Brandon, I want to start with a question from Hugo Lopez, a longtime member of our community, where he points out that Fred Laloux says CEOs and shareholders that radically become conscious and start caring for their company's higher purpose is because they went through some very difficult personal challenges, death, near death, loss. And besides this, what examples can you give that triggers a person to go beyond the point of I need more to I have enough? What have you seen to be some of those triggers?
So I think it takes a very special, first of all, thanks Hugo for the question. Appreciate it. He's a good friend. It takes a very special person to get to a point to say, I have enough, just on their own. And I think oftentimes people have to get to a point where they have too much. And in my case, that was the only way I know. Too much in my case was in the form of a health scare. I've seen it in the form of divorce. I've seen it in the form of family contention, of substance abuse. But oftentimes it comes in the way of too much. And you say, oh, okay, all right, I gotta dial this back. But having said that, I do want to give one caveat to this because I think it's really important, really, really important. This message that I speak of is not just for uber wealthy people. Like the most generous people I've met have transformed money into lifestyle and then gone on to purpose and then onto abundance and then all the way up to unity. And they have, and these generous people have the most modest of assets. I've truly seen that before. And the other thing is that as you move up this spectrum, you're actually divesting of money, which isn't always, you're giving this, you're putting this money out in the world away from you. So I say that because oftentimes you have to have too much to find out that you have enough, but you don't need to have an abundance of, you don't need to be, as like we say, like Richie Rich. You don't have to be a billionaire. Like we can all do this. Almost all of us. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brandon. So another one of our participants is asking if you can expand on how transparency, knowing what you own and so on, helps you balance beliefs and your vision.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that we find is very difficult is that people get very nervous around money. Some people get very nervous around money, or they have an uncertainty around it. And that the financial services industry, or Wall Street, as they say, creates that uncertainty almost, it seems, conveniently for in their case. And so oftentimes they will sell very advanced products with leverage or like some type of swap or option strategy. And if none of that makes sense, it's okay, because you don't really need to know any of that. You just need to know most times you need to avoid that. But what the industry has seen, or there's been a trend, is that investing is a product, right? They've said that investing is a product. They've commoditized themselves, and they've done that purposely. And with commoditizing it, they've taken all of these abstractions from the person who has the assets or the investor from their assets, right? And that might not have been clear. So what I mean to say is that within the industry, there is still access to individuals. And what I propose is that people know what they own and why they own it, and not see investing as a product, but to see it as a process, and to own companies whenever possible, not some XYZ mutual fund with 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 different holdings. Because when things get rough in the market, and they will get rough, I know it doesn't seem like it now, but they will, it feels really nice to be able to look at your investments and say, oh, I see what I own. I own this company. They're doing good. I know who's in the leadership. I know what I can expect from this. It's down, but it'll come back. But when you just look at a balance sheet full of a bunch of products that are very expensive and are very opaque, it's hard to have that sense of abundance. So we can actually help you can help yourself by the way you invest to create abundance and to cultivate it.
Thank you, Brandon. You're even calling attention to me to go back and look at that and to have greater transparency into this. So thank you. And next, I want to go to a question from Julie Wilson, who says that the I have enough and the I am enough kind of speech reminds her a lot of the writings from Thich Nhat Hanh and his ideas of peace. And she's wondering if these ideals you're recommending are rooted in meditative texts and works like that.
I've drawn on, so I do have a robust meditation practice, and it's mantra based, and I do like Eastern religions. I've been studying them, and the ideas that I'm proposing have also been influenced by my work through Gestalt and psychotherapy through the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, and I also believe that everything in my book is new because I wrote it, and it's all been inspired by others. And although I am not I'm familiar with that particular work in detail, all of this is bubbling up to the surface right now, and it's been around and a little bit hidden, and a lot of people are shining a light on it, as I am, and I'm really glad to hear that as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brandon. And I want to call attention to the fact that you actually have, in addition to this book, a card game that you've developed.
Yes. Yeah.
Called Conscious Wealth Conversations. And I was fortunate enough to get one of the first decks of it. There we go. Thank you. And could you explain a little bit about what this card game is and why it's available? Because for everyone listening, we actually have the opportunity for you to get a digital version of the game if you submit your email in the chat box. And I want to give you a chance to explain what this is, Brandon.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, this was the version you got, which was the version 1.0, and they all have questions. So here's the question actually that I just asked you.
Can you lift a little higher?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm not. Yeah. What is your first memory about money, and how does it impact you today? So what we were looking to do was activate the book. In the book, there are these chapter questions at the end, and we saw with study groups, they just flipped right through them. Like, okay, I don't need to do those exercises. So we built these cards. We use these cards with our clients. We give them to them and say, hey, work with these, especially with multi-generational. Take them over the dinner table, play around with them for a bit. We had one client say, I'm going to take this on my first dates or something like that. It's a lot of questions, all of them about money, but very much about values and geared towards creating conversations about something that people don't like to talk about, money. So that's why we've built them. This is the newer version, and we'll send out we'll pick a couple people and send the hard copy to, and then we'll send everybody a digital version.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brandon. And as a reminder, everyone, if you give us your email in your chat box, you can get the digital version of that card game ASAP. So with that, go back to a question from Ron Barger, another member of the Conscious Capitalism Senior Leader Network and longtime community member. He says, thank you for your insights and wisdom today. I'm intrigued by the concept of using financial resources for healing and converting into impact. Would you be willing to tell us the most impactful example you've been a part of where you were able to help a person take their resources and convert it into purpose? And did that ultimately change their lifestyle and perspective on life?
Giving a personal example of somebody who used money for impact. So using it along this business model.
Well, I'm not sure it's just the business model, but an example of someone that you've worked with where you've helped this transformation that you've seen.
Yeah, we're actually currently working with a family with two children, and one of the kids is starting his life over. Had some things that happened and needs to start over. And so we're working towards educating them around money and surrounding this individual with coaches so that he can properly apply for a job and get a job and begin this kind of turn a new leaf. And the other child is going through a divorce and has received a lot of discouragement and started to internalize those beliefs that she just can't handle money. She won't be okay if she's not if she's not in this relationship. And so creating structures around this family and using financial assets, because it costs money to do this stuff, right? Like not just for me, but to create all these teams and support for the individuals within the family, it costs money. And so that's probably the best example that we're currently working on. And it's the most rewarding work I have. Like that's pretty awesome to see. We have another client in doesn't matter where they're at, and generously puts aside 25% of their salary each year. And it's actually absolutely inspiring to see. And then creating connections between this client and people on the ground doing good work that align with his vision. And in both cases, well, in the first case, we're seeing a growth in self-esteem and self-awareness or self-actualization, which is a beautiful thing. And in the other case, I don't know, I think the second one where he's giving away 25%, he's just always been there. And I just get to sit by and be inspired because I'm not wired that way. I'm not wired that way. And so I think the healing is not so much for him. I'm seeing the healing outside in the world. Yeah. It's a great question. Thanks, Ron.
Brilliant. So Anthony Ferguson is wondering, do you believe people should be advocates of this approach to life? And if so, how can they be advocates of it?
Do I believe people should be advocates at this point? Yeah, I do. I think if we believe that all we can do is transform money into a lifestyle or cars or boats or houses, and that's all we could do with it, I think we're missing out. Like, in finding ways to transform that. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we're doing right now in terms of creating advocacy is that, as I said in the beginning, I thought, well, this is going to be something where I'm just going to grow my practice. And that's just not true anymore. Like really now we're just authentically getting out there, working with your team to do workshops at different chapters around how the workshop is around creating this money timeline. Here are the beliefs I've had around money over time. How are those beliefs impacting me today? How's it impacting my spending? And designing a financial map for the future, big picture. So ways that you can help advocate is providing or letting me know if there are opportunities to get this message out and run this workshop, because it's very important to me. It's everyone has a way that they're going to create social change and to create a better world. Part of it's through my work, like my traditional work, but another part of it is just learning from other people as I present this message and growing.
So we'll use that as an opportunity for people to reach out to you and ask you to lead those workshops or share this with others. How can people get in touch with you, Brandon, if they want to help you with running some of those workshops?
Oh, just thank you, Alexander. Just my first name at last name. So it's Brandon at brandonhatton.com. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So Ellen Rogan is wondering, how would you recommend that couples navigate this discussion? If I have enough when one person is more fear-based or worried about their financial future security than the other person in a couple?
Man, that's such a great question. Yeah, that is such a great question. And I would guess that if those fears exist, those fears do not just exist around money, right? Because the fear that we place on money, if we have all the money in the world, we place that fear on something else. It may be losing the money. And gosh, that's a great question. Thanks, Ellen. I would have to say, all I know is where it starts, which is dialogue around that and examining where these fears come from. Of course, you can look at so what we do and what every financial advisor with their SALT does is run a report and say, you're going to run out of money or you're not, right? And a lot of times we're at 99% chance you're not going to run out of money. And we can't, and in those cases, the only reason we can't say 100 is because we'd get sued. It's that sure, you're never going to run out of money. And the fear is sometimes still there. So if you haven't done one of those types of analysis, you should do it. And it may help, and it may. And it may be deeper work in terms of examining some of these beliefs, examining that fear, which is really hard to do. And using money as a proxy to discover that fear, I think is valid, and it may take you other places.
Great question, great answer. Thank you, Brandon. And we're coming near the end, so if you have any more questions, please type them in. We'll get through as many as possible, and if we can't get to all of them, I apologize. But I want to go next to Nathan Hurd, another Senior Leader Network member, who wants to know if you believe that feeling wealthy in life, in money, in relationships, is a prerequisite for creating abundance in the lives of yourselves and others. If so, are there ways you have found that work to snap people out of the materialistic, consumptive, money equals identity trance?
Yeah, it is like a chicken and egg type of thing. And as I mentioned before, I kind of alluded to before, I completely admire anyone who has very, very little financial assets and still embraces abundance. I was not able to do that. I mean, complete transparency. I needed a certain level, and it doesn't matter what level it is. Everyone has some level that not everyone. People, oftentimes we see that somebody says, well, once I get to this level, it'll be okay. And other people can do it in verse. And the danger, of course, is you get to that level and you say, well, no, actually, I want to be at that level, or actually, I want to get at that level. It becomes like a horizon, right? That we say 10 million, rich is always $10 million more than you have. And so getting back to Nathan, I believe's question was, is there a way to embrace abundance without actually before it gets ugly, or before it's, without actually having the assets? And my answer to that is practice abundance. Tip generously, buy locally, give gifts, give and not count the cost, right? And because when you do that, you're saying to yourself, you're telling yourself, I have enough. And it's not just telling yourself, I can look in the mirror all day, every morning, and recite, I have enough, and it doesn't stick. But sometimes actually doing it does help. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Chris Kenny is wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how your book might serve those of us who are not financially independent.
Well, I'm not financially independent. I mean, I still have to work. So, and Chris, and thanks for the question. And I would just say that I wrote the book, and I feel wealthy, and I know that I have enough, but I always preface that I still have to go to work tomorrow. And so independently wealthy, I would probably try to understand the question more, and I'm sure there was more to that question that we're not having dialogue right now. But I think abundance can be embraced and is embraced. I've seen abundance embraced by people with very little financial assets, and I admire it. And And last thing I'll say about it is I don't feel abundant every day. Just because I wrote the book, there are days where I get scared, like, oh my gosh, I'm missing out. I should have bought Bitcoin in 2009, or something like that. Like, what, I'm not sure what I would do with all that money, but some days I'm convinced I should have done that. So it is, it's a spectrum, and you're going to move up and down it. Yeah.
You know, I had friends telling me about Bitcoin and encouraging me to buy it back when it was $5, and they were day trading it back then. And
Yeah.
I would often say to people, my biggest regret in life was not listening to them and investing in Bitcoin back then. But I was talking with someone a couple of weeks ago at an event, and I said that to him, and he said, "No, you're looking at it wrong. You did that's not a regret. It's something for you to learn from so that you can take advantage of the next 1000x opportunity that comes up, because that's not the only one. There are going to be future opportunities." And I think that's very in line with the mindset shift that you're encouraging here as well, to focus on the abundance and the opportunities ahead rather than regretting any mistakes in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And for everybody and for every Bitcoin or these explosive types of growth, there are 100x of things that have fallen flat on its face. And the way to financial independence, as I mentioned, is knowing what you own, and it doesn't ever steer you wrong. Yeah.
Here,
It's been a
here.
good conversation, Alexander. I really appreciate it. All these great questions too.
Me too, Brandon. I just so appreciate you writing the book, putting this message out there in the world, and sharing it with so many people. The last question from the audience is, are you planning on doing an audio version of the book at some point?
Uh, my biggest emphasis right now is getting out to chapters and speaking at professional organizations such as YPO is pretty important to me. And finding, even though this message is applicable to people of all levels, is getting this message out to people with power, the traditional forms of power or wealth, as we say, and then we'll see what comes. So right now, no plans.
All right. Well, we're about out of time, but is there any final message that you want to leave everyone with before we depart today?
Well, I always remind myself that I have enough. I remind myself that I'm enough, and that I can transform money into so much more than just a lifestyle.
Really, Brandon, thank you for joining us today. And I want to say to everyone here with us, thank you for being a part of this conversation. I'd like to ask if you could take 30 seconds to fill out the survey in the chat box. That'll help us plan more future programming and create additional great events like this for you. And if you're new to Conscious Capitalism, please visit consciouscapitalism.org/start here for more information about the movement and how to get involved. And with that, I'll say I hope you all have a great day. Brandon, you especially, thank you so much. Looking
Thank you.
forward to setting up more of these with chapters and others, and looking forward to seeing everyone on the next virtual gathering in a week.